All right, so I just started the recording. Since we have just a few of us here today, I will greet you by name. We got Andre Bayer. Is that how we pronounce your last name, Andre?
Yeah, that's
Or
correct.
are you in Germany?
In Germany, yeah. In northern
Oh,
Germany, in Hamburg.
I love Germany. I have many friends there, but when it comes to soccer, you guys gave us one of the worst
Yeah.
nightmares of all time. So, yeah, we'll talk about Power Platform, but not talk about soccer. All right, ever. Of course, we have the newest, the freshest MVP in the room, Sharon Adley. Thanks for being with us today. Mala, thanks for joining us. And the new, I get messages from I think it's you, Mala.
Yes,
You
please see on the LinkedIn. Yeah, so I'm always active on LinkedIn. So because I don't have the one link which is we can you join or throughout the session zero to hero session. So I'm just double checking whether this is the right link to join.
Perfect. Yeah, and I do appreciate the feedback as well. I think Anu as well. He sends messages indicating things he liked, the things that we are to improve, and just encouragement. It's great to hear from you guys. I really appreciate it. So what we are gonna look at today isn't really I should say best practices in Power Automate as much as tips and tricks, if you will, or things that I personally use when I'm developing flows that I believe helps getting things done. Now, I think some of you may have done Power Automate flows in the past, and you may have different ways for doing the same things. Since this is like an open mic lesson, if you will, at any point, raise your hand, and then if you want to share your screen, you more than welcome to share your screen and then show how you get maybe the same feature done or something similar done. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So again, open mic for me it's afternoon, maybe it's night for you, but it's an open mic lesson. Whatever, it's all fair game here. Whatever you think can add to our knowledge, feel free to chime in. All right. So I am in my Power Platform environment in the make.powerapps.com. Let me make another parenthesis as well. I'm gonna go really, really slow and really from level zero on this lesson today. So forgive me if it may seem that the content is too basic, but I don't want anybody to miss the train here. I want everybody to get on board and follow through on each topic. So I am on make.powerapps.com. This is pretty much the area where you can create um, Power Apps, Canvas apps, model-driven apps, where you can create flows, chat bots, you name it. This is the area. This is the maker portal, as some of the resources in our industry refer to. So in order to get to it, you go to make.powerapps.com. And if you do not have an environment um, that you can use, you can always Google Power Platform Developer Environment. And as long as you have a work account, which doesn't mean necessarily that it is your work account. It could be a domain that you own. I own dantas.ca, and this is the domain that I use to create my Power Platform dev account. Okay, so that's what I use. My particular the maker works across environment, okay, but it's always within the tenant of your account, okay. So this is how I am set up. So in here, what I will do is I'll go to flows, and then you have 3 tabs where you can do cloud flows, where you can do desktop flows. This is pretty much RPA and business process flows. All right. So we are going to work on cloud flows. We're going to take a look at the Dataverse connector and a few attributes and how to use some of the actions and triggers in this particular flow or this particular connector. So let's do that. You always have the option of creating from a template if you want. Almost every time the template refers to one connector for trigger and another connector for an action. So read from Google Gmail, push it to an Excel online. Read it from Dynamics, push it to another connector elsewhere. So if you want to play with templates, it's good. It gives you a skeleton of what a flow would look like. But I want to use a instant flow. And you can see on the icon here, let me maximize it, and then we'll go back to normal there. So an automated flow, it'll be a flow that's triggered based on an event. And we saw that on the first lesson. An instant flow is a flow that I can trigger by click run it now. Has a button, right? The scheduled cloud flow is one that I put on a particular schedule at a particular time of the day or different times in a week. Okay, different days at different times in a week. And then again, you have once again desktop flows for RPA and business process flows, right? So the 3 types we can play with as cloud flows are properly labeled, right? I want to do an instant cloud flow just for the sake of this class and demo, right? So I will trigger this myself, all right? But but for this instant cloud flow, you can set it up for it to be triggered from a Power App or for it to be triggered from a Power BI button and then other options down here. So my flow name would be, let's call it 0 to hero lesson 3. And you can, and you probably should use something that's more descriptive to the function that you are building, right? So you can call it whatever is applicable to the particular feature or function that you're trying to create. And by that, what I mean is if you have a requirement to update all contacts in Dataverse that are located in Seattle, Washington. So you could say update contacts from Seattle or set credit score for this particular user, so on and so forth. All right. So this is my trigger again. I'm gonna hit create. And then now I have my flow. So the flow has a trigger, again, manually triggered, where when it's ready to go, I can click test and run. And first thing we're gonna look at here is I will add one step. So the first connector I wanna show is how do I create a record in Dataverse, okay? So in order for me to get there, I can type Dataverse and it will show the connectors. There is a legacy and there is the new one. I always go for the new one because the legacy will be doomed soon. So I can select the new one and then you have the options. Add a new row. So this is what we want at this stage. I want to add a new row. It will tell me to select a particular table. I want to create an account. Okay. And then it took a little bit of time there to show me the other fields. I will manually say my account name is 0 to hero lesson 3. So my action is pretty much done here, meaning that I will create an account with this particular field and that's it. Now I can add more information. So the city is Calgary, address Harbor Lake, or maybe I shouldn't put my address here on this video that's going to YouTube. I'll put Cheryl's. Where is the state? And then there's more options for all the other fields because this entity is huge, right? So I can control F, look for state. So this is done. I'll save my flow and then test it. Run my flow. This is done now. Let's go to Dynamics and check the data. I will open in Advanced Find. Counts. And then I have my account here. Let's just create it. All right, with the data that I wanted, it's all good to go. Now, that flow by itself, it doesn't really do anything marvelous, right? Remember, I'm just showing you connectors and how they work. So let's go back to the flow and start to play with it. Somebody, I think someone last week asked about variables. So let's add a variable to the scoop here. So I'm gonna create a new step, add action. So I can type variable and I want to initialize my variable. Okay, variable name will be account name and type. I will say that it is a string. The value will be another account name Inc. Right? So now I have my variable. I can properly label this variable to use down the path here, especially if my flow grows. It's good to properly name each step so you can refer to it later on. So I will call this or label this as account name or initialize. So that is there. Then if I go back to that particular task, I, following the same principle, I can rename it to create account, right? Now, and from here, what I want is I want to use the variable that I just created to populate this name. So I can delete it. And then when I put the mouse over, it shows me the variable. Okay. So now if I test and save and test my flow, you see that it will create an account with the name that's coming from the variable. There's my account, advanced find. So another account name Inc. with the proper attributes. Okay, so now let's have a look at the execution log for this thing, right? Because eventually what's going to happen is some of this actions or tasks won't work. And then we need to find out why they didn't. Okay, So in here, on the execution, I can expand and then look at the fields that were set for this particular connector in execution. And then I can look at the output. All right. So when this command or this action runs, it pushes this as input. Okay, if I had more fields, it would show in there. And then it shows this here as output, meaning that if I have any other action past this one, I can refer to these outputs on the other, on my flow for other things. So let's suppose that I want to send an email out. So I can refer to these outputs while the code executes. Now, let's say that I need the ID off of this thing, off of the account that was just created. So you see here that I have a reference to it right here that I can use in my flow. And then amongst all other things, right? See, account IDs here, status. All right. So if we go back to edit the workflow, we can say now, okay, this task is done creating an account. Now I want another action for creating a contact and assign it to this account. So I will again add another step. It's going to use the Dataverse connector. And in here, still want to add a new row. Now the new row will be in contact. Okay, so field, last name, I'll say Dantas. I'm not gonna set any of the address fields just for the sake of time. Okay, first, this is my first name field. Oh, I have to expand it. Let's see if it finds it now. Not. First name, Victor. Okay. Now the column that I need to find here is parent account. Maybe we should make this a bit parent. Yeah. All right, company name. So in here, I want to set this to the account that was just created. Let's see if we can tap into this particular output. You see here, account unique identifier. Let's hope that we can read from it. So this is done. So my flow is done to create a contact with my name and associate it with the account record that I create when I create it. Okay. So what I will do is I'll delete this guy so that we don't get mixed up. And then I'm gonna run this flow again. And hopefully this works. My flow failed. All right, resource not found in this segment. Why is that?
You have to put the account in front of the input and do it in brackets.
All right.
Because
So
it's a lookup field.
It's pretty odd because for other references, it just does the work. So what Andrew's saying is that we have to refer to the old data path for this thing to work. So it should be, what are you saying? It should be a dynamic expression where you say, oops, in here, backslash accounts.
I'm
like
not sure if this works. So the backslash, only accounts and then the brackets are. So type account, yeah, I think this is correct.
Okay. Let's see. All right. So let's go to the advanced find, refresh. We might see two accounts here. Let's see which one has a contact now. Actually, we can flip it around. Let's do the query on contacts. Lovely. Which one is it? All right. So it did add the account, the contact record, and added a reference to account. Now, we promised that we would be very detailed in what we do, right? So let's expand this and let's have a look at this particular instruction and why we have this notation. Okay, so this is referring to the Web API, Dynamics Web API notation for this particular record. So if we go to advanced settings, then we go to customizations, then customize the system. Sorry, wrong place. Developer resources. And then you go to, you get the Web API address for this instance. I'm not sure why it's taking forever, but let's wait for it. Okay, I might need to refresh. I don't know if you noticed that sometimes the old, the old client, it says it's loading, but it's somehow lost. You just need to refresh. Well, this is the address for Web API. Let's take, not quite this yet. Now this is. So in here, if you do this, you see quite a bit of metadata information for the API. What the heck? It's not loading. Should load. Maybe it's too much. But with this particular notation that we saw on the flow, you can access the repo, if you will, of accounts, account records. What in the world is going on? What? Let me copy again. Okay, that's better. So if you tag on accounts, you see the JSON response with all account records and fields in the Dataverse. Now, using this notation, the parenthesis plus the GUID, then you are telling the Web API to render the record itself, not everything. So in essence, when you look back at the flow, you're saying is I want to set a reference for this account company name to this GUID within the accounts or the account entity. Sorry. In here, though, you always have to use plural. It used to be that the API accepted singular and plural. It is no longer the case for a few versions now, but it used to accept either. And it was really problematic when they did the cutoff because folks who use singular had to go back and fix all their API calls. All right, so far so good, everybody. Is this too basic or are we liking it?
It works for me.
All right,
Thank
all right,
you.
sounds good. So okay, so let's now have a look at how we could add a query, if you will, to our package. Again, assuming that this is a trigger that I run myself and I want to have the functionality of maybe looping through all contacts based in Calgary as an example. And then from there, let's say that we want to create an activity for me as a user to follow up with those particular users. Andrew, I see you typing. Is there anything that you want to say in the mic?
No, only
Okay.
if you use custom tables. So don't forget to push also the prefix behind before the table. So
That is a good, it's worth mentioning. So this particular name that we use here,
Yeah.
it is the schema name of the entity in plural. Okay. And sometimes it may get confusing because if plural, as we know, like in the regular English, it doesn't work, it may have a funky notation. So for example, you have an entity called dependency, right? And you want to access the repo, if you will, for that entity. You may have to try a few different things. First of all, prefix underscore the name of the entity because it's the schema name. And then you have people maybe make a mistake of saying, oh, the plural of dependency is dependencies, IES. So you may have to play with the plurals to get it right. But the cool thing is, though, you can always go to the web API address and try it out. If I type something that's wrong, just put a wrong name, it will tell me that this resource doesn't exist, which is exactly the error that we saw down here on the execution that failed, right? Well, similar error, right? And so, what in the world's going on? So as you look at this error logs, I mean, you end up getting familiar with the error messages, and we'll be able to identify what may be wrong with the flow. Okay, so what we are going to do now is we're going to add a query here. And what I want to do is I want to query Dataverse, right? Again, when I select the connector, it gives me quite a lot of actions. So you have change set request, which is really cool. Update a file or image, update a row, unrelate row, which means dissociate, or relate row, associate. This is what Yash presented last week. Perform unbound action or a bound action. So a lot of the features or functionality that you have in the Dataverse can be accessible through here, right? And this could be a way, opening a big parenthesis here, could be a way for you to trigger a workflow in the Dataverse by using a bound action. Okay, all right, but let's get back on track here. Sorry. What we are going to do is we are going to list rows. In other words, we are going to query the Dataverse. So in this example, I will look at accounts. All right, and let me kill those other connectors as we don't need them anymore. Okay, so we'll rename list accounts in Calgary. All right. And what we are going to do is we are going to filter this query. All right. So what we want to accomplish is I want to show all accounts in which the city is set to Calgary. All right. So address one city equals Calgary. Victor, how do I get to know all these expressions? So what you need to do is you can query Dataverse, web, API, filter, or operator, sorry. I can't type. So you have all sorts of different things here. Let me see if we can dive straight into the operator. So EQ equal, NE not equal, GT greater than, so on and so forth. All right. So if I were to run my flow, I would get the results that I need. Let's in fact do that. Let's save. Okay, there's nothing happening past this query, but I just want to show the result set. All right, so in here I can click and I can look at the output. Oh, come on, I want to see the code output. Why is it not showing here? It should show the JSON. Let us put another action here just for the sake of it. Delete this variable, save, test. Okay. It says test running. Let's see if it's done. It says done. Not sure why it's not showing my output. Andrew, did you want to say anything? If you're talking, you may be muted.
Sorry, I missed this thing.
Save, or maybe my query is not yielding results because I might not have an account in Calgary. Let's see, I thought I created those in Calgary. So let's let me make sure we have enough data there for this example. And this is low. Okay, accounts. Gonna add the city column. All right, all my accounts are in Calgary, so we have enough there. Okay, let's save. And again, test it. Down. Round failed. Okay. We'll look into this one, but I'm more interested in this output. Oh, I think I know what's going on here. Sorry. Let's go back. Edit. Okay. So what I forgot to do is in my flow, I want to create one task per each account that I find as part of my result set. In order to do that, I have to use an each, apply to each activity, and then add the values here. So I'm going to essentially loop through each of the account records and then create a task. Come on. Let me delete this from here. I'll create it fresh. Okay, add a new row. The table is task. Oh, I think I know what's going on. I don't think I have task in this Dataverse. It should be part of the native once, maybe. Let's
Excuse
see.
me, Victor.
Yeah.
I was wondering, last week he was using a compose action to actually see the output from his requests. So just wondering if you were to use one such action, would you be seeing what your output in this case?
Yeah, you could do that. So you could see the output in the execution. It's actually a good idea. Maybe I'm being too lazy, but yeah, because in my scenario here, if I'm testing, I'm gonna be creating loads of appointments, right? Before I can see the result set. But I was interested in looking at the old data coming out of this guy. Maybe we can see it on each iteration of this for each or apply to each. But yeah, you most definitely can do that. And maybe in the future they will allow us to somehow have breakpoints between tasks for flow. We'll see. So the apply to each works. You see that I got 3 records here. 1, 2, 3. And then we saw that the result worked. But I think they changed some of the displays here because it used to be that you could get the output of the connector on the connector itself, much like what we do here. So if I click on add new, you see that I have access to the body down here, you see? It used to be that the list would also give you that ability. That's probably why Ash used the composite for that. But it executed it, created the account records. And if we go back to the Dataverse and open the appointments entity, we'll be able to see it. So yeah, we got 3 appointments. This seems to be a duplicate, but we actually have 2 accounts with that name. And then I use the created on date to populate the starting due date. So it's good to go in that sense. Now, a few things about this connector before we end that we have to be mindful of. And the reason why, again, it's important to see the output so you can decide what you use and how to play with the values down in your flow. So these queries though, they let me actually show you what I mean. So we did a query on accounts in which we are looking at accounts in Calgary, right? So if I go back to the web API or the OData service, and instead of giving the ID, I do a query. So we do question mark %, dollar sign, not %, I think dollar sign, filter, and the filter would be address 1 underscore city space equals space Calgary, and I will copy this address before I lose it. Then I get my result set. Okay. Now let's assume that from here I want to see I want to see a related value. Look at this thing down here. I'm gonna maximize to make it easier. Created by. Created by is a lookup field to system user, right? And so when we list values from this entity and we do not specify which columns we want to list, it gives me pretty much all fields in the entity. And this is the notation for the for the lookup fields. You get an underscore, you get the name of the field, and then value for the GUID associated to that field. So we got to keep all of this in mind when we are constructing our flows. And again, let's suppose the flow is when, give me all accounts in Calgary, all right? And instead of creating a appointment for me, let me create an appointment for the person who actually created this account in the first place, right? So now I would come in here to the owners area and do system users, right? Parentheses. And then I have to compose my expression to read that field from my result set. When you hover over these pretty labels here, it gives you the notation, right? So if I want to read that value, I would type equals items, parenthesis, single column, apply to each, close, and then close parenthesis, question mark, so on and so forth. But instead of name, I would use the value that's coming right here for this scenario, or for this particular field. Does that make sense to everybody? Maybe, maybe not.
Is there a difference between a user or a team? So on the fields now. Oh, okay.
It would be different if it was. Then you'd have to figure out. I don't know if it's giving us the type here. It's not giving us the type. So in essence, if you had to do that, you would need to figure out who the owner is here. And I think the simplest way to do it, it would be to, instead of doing it with a simple query to the account, to expand and use fetch XML for that. So you could do a left join on both user and teams, and then whichever one would be populated in that record, you'd use it down on creating the appointment.
Okay.
Does that make sense to everybody? All right.
Makes sense, but I think I'm going to need to work through it. I stopped following you about 10 minutes ago because I didn't have all the things I needed in my trial, but yeah.
Okay. And then again, if you use fetch, your fetch will have aliases, right? Especially if and a lot of times these aliases are not very descriptive, especially if you are lazy like me. I construct my queries from advanced find and then I fine tune it later on, but I only change the labels if I need, right? So what you would do is if your fetch query is pretty big,
You can
it's
also
hard
use
to
the
sorry?
you can also use your XML toolbox, for example.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, it's
fetch XML builder.
That's what I would normally do if I'm honest.
yeah. But my point is though, a lot of times the results are funky, meaning I gave you the example of the created by, right? So the created by has this notation, or any other lookup will have that notation. But then when you add the alias, then you get a bit more to your to the name of your column. So you have to inspect the JSON to be able to use this well. Okay. All right. Before we finish, there are other properties here that points to the web API as well. So select columns. What is this? Well, I want to query the accounts entity, but I do not want to return all columns. So if I go back to the API, I use the filter parameter here. Now I'm going to use the select parameter, right? Select equals, I want name and address 1_city. Now I have a smaller result set. So that's one record. This is another record. And that's another record. Much smaller output, right? Because I have defined which columns I want in my result set. Maybe I don't need everything. Okay. Back to the connector, sort by, the same thing. Oh, but I want to know how to use these things. Well, go back to the documentation. If you go other by, that's your parameter right there. Okay. Expand query. So what is expand query? Expand query, the parameter allows for you to give the name, the schema name of a relationship that you have to that entity, and then bring columns from that relationship. Okay, there can only be one expand, so it's very limiting to use this if you have a huge query like the one I was telling Andre. If you have to join teams and users and you want to know the names, now there is no other way besides fetch XML. Okay, row count, it's simple enough. I want a top 1 row, top 2 rows, so on and so forth. I haven't used skip token, so if anybody has, you are free to chime in. Neither I've used partition ID. Okay, so maybe somebody who has more expertise with that connector will be able to give us the info. Now, cool thing is you can always go here and say, let me have a peek at the code. And there you have it. So everything that we see that we can do on the API, you'll be able to see it. So that is my filter. I can copy and paste here and test it, see if there are problems there. And that's pretty much it for what I'm doing with the connector, right? But yeah, and this, and the other thing too is this is similar if you have done .NET programming for Dynamics. The list accounts is similar to retrieve multiple. Okay, so you're only gonna be able to play with it if you do a for each, so you can see the results and loop through it. If you know that there will be just one result because of your filter, you can always do top one and then you still do the apply each, but it's one loop. Okay. If you know the GUID of the record and you wanted to get it, the connector gives you the, I think it's called get record or read record or something like that, get row by ID. That will be similar to retrieve record in the SDK. Okay, now if you haven't realized just yet, the connector is using Web API. It's not using the XML service. Nobody told me, but I think the XML service will be going away soon, in place of us using more and more the OData service. So again, if your entity is just 10 fields, I don't know if I would bother adding the columns. But if you're dealing with a big entity and you're going to return a lot of data, I would limit the result set so that your particular task that reads data is faster. Okay, we are 5 minutes from the top of the hour, or before the top of the hour. Anybody who wants to ask questions, most welcome to, or comments, or I don't know. Mic is open. Anything that we
That
want
went
to.
so quickly.
I know that was fast, huh?
Yeah, just one question. I have 20 initialize variables in front of the flow. So I know there is a point that I can minimize them with an array or with an object with the initialize. Is there any session until November where we discuss also those stuff, or so how can I put this together in only one initialize variable as an array or as an object? So that I don't have 20 of those things, and you know, this is terrible.
I know there is a way to create a variable. There is an array,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you're using multiple data types, right? Or if those are just strings.
Yeah, let's assume that's only strings. So yeah.
So let's see here. I'm not sure if I have the right answer, but if you do an array like this, and then I think how it initializes is a JSON notation, something like this. You know, I think so. I mean, I'll send you a link. I think I saw it the other day.
Yeah, it would be cool. So that would help me with my daily business. So perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's how it's done. Now there is also though, I think it's 2 weeks from today. Let me see when his session is scheduled. Thomas. So he's gonna be doing. He actually asked me to change this name, the name of the session. Should be called like code flow, meaning how do I organize my flow so that it's readable, it's somewhat pretty. So he's gonna be talking about it 2 weeks from today. So it should answer some other questions, but I think the array does the job for what you're looking for. In fact, let's have a look.
If you find the link now, it would be cool to maybe you can send it to me. And
yeah, so that is the setup for arrays. I'll post the link here. This is a bit old. It doesn't show how you read, just how you declare. But I think to read, you'd say name of the variable and then position of the array that you wanna read. Let me throw that into the chat window here, but that should solve what we're looking for. It may be troublesome for you later on to identify or to keep track of the position of what value, if you will, each position of the array represent, right? But it's a trade-off because right now you have 20 variables. They have a name, right? So later on, when you use, okay, variable at position 3, what does this mean? So it would be nice if we could just collapse some of this stuff. Maybe have collapsible groups as part of the flow, not necessarily linked to the function itself, but if you could select a few steps and say, much like in code, where you say region, right?
Yeah.
You have the regions. That it doesn't really tie into what's happening in code, but the developer decides what that region represents. So it'd be nice in Flow if we could create such thing as well and collapse it. Maybe it's something we suggest to Microsoft. Cheryl, you are the newest MVP. You should suggest it to Microsoft.
I will. I'll see what I can do. Right, you can maybe give me some help with how to approach that. I'm really. I've got to go because I've got a training session now. But Victor, thank you so much. That was awesome as always.
For spending time with us. We'll see you next week.
Lovely to see everyone as well. Bye bye. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.